Hey guys, today I'm with Liz Orr, the very popular Instagram influencer behind Rude Ass ENNEAGRAM. And she's the co-creator of the guide for the ENNEAGRAM and the type of labor support that you need. So do yourself a favor if you're getting ready to give birth and share this episode with your birth partners. They're going to want to listen to it, because we want them to take care of you in the perfect ways. And this episode is going to give them a lot of tools and tips and tricks based on your personality type. So let's get to it. What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does a day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them and you deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. Just a little something before we get started today, and that is, what happens if you don't take Birth Story Academy? So let's say you're pregnant. That's why you're listening to the Birth Story podcast, and you're preparing for a hospital birth that's upcoming. And of course, this podcast gives you tons of free information, right? But do you really understand the stages of labor? How to know when you're in labor? What if you have to have an induction? What about a cesarean section? What about all of the decisions that you have to make once you get to the hospital? So you get there and then they put you in triage. Birth Story Academy walks you through all the things that happen, like that rapid fire with monitoring and blood work and questions and IV ports. And do you want an epidural? I don't know. Do you? In Birth Story Academy, we literally break down all of those decisions, pros, cons, risks, benefits, intuition. And we get into it. We make birth plans, we do birth visions, we listen to birth affirmations and parenting affirmations. And at the end of it, you know exactly what's going to happen when you go into labor and when you get to the hospital. What's going to happen after you give birth, newborn care preferences, how to take care of your baby. So I guess what I'm getting at is, if you're not in Birth Story Academy, what's your plan, right? I want to be your teacher. I want you to come join me in Birth Story Academy and let me walk you through all of the decisions that you have to make if you're having a hospital birth, and how to have body autonomy and how to have informed consent and informed refusal. I'm going to teach you and your partner, if you have one, everything that you need to know about birthing in a hospital so that you can walk in that door with some swagger, with some confidence, wash that anxiety away because you learned everything you needed to learn in Birth Story Academy and you are ready to crush that birth, right? Okay, let's do it. And let's get to this episode. Hey guys, welcome to the Birth Story podcast. I am interviewing Liz Orr today of Rude Ass ENNEAGRAM. I am so excited, Liz. Good to see you.
I'm excited to be here. It's so good to see you.
Yeah. So you guys, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, then you know I have another podcast. Thinks it's the trauma. We interviewed Liz on the Thinks It's the Trauma podcast, all about the Enneagram. So that was fun. That was a really fun time.
That was a really fun time. I think that was one of my favorite podcast that I've ever gotten to be a part of before.
And Nikki, Alyssa, and I are Enneagram 7, 8, and 9. So that kind of like was just a great episode. So I'll link to it in the show notes if you guys want it. This is what I always tell everybody. You're here for a birth podcast, but if you're like a super nosy person and you're like, whoa, I need to know more about Heidi, listen on things. It's the drama. So I loved Liz, her Instagram, her energy, everything. And so we actually teamed up after that. And I thought, I'm going to do some Googling here. And I wonder if there's anything to personality type and the birth experience. And I couldn't find anything. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm on to something here. We've got to tie birth support needs to personality type in the Enneagram. And so we did it.
We did do it. And I, even on my side, when I posted the guide ultimately and the photos, I heard from people who are like, wait, nobody's done this before. So leave it to a 7 to find the new frontier. That was amazing and wonderful.
Yeah. Well, and it's been so cool because I've been a doula for 18 years and I actually like have a micro community for Birth Story Academy and my doula clients that they're in this Facebook group. And I was able to correctly identify every single one of my clients who birthed in the last year, their Enneagram type, except for one.
Ooh,
and it was only
cool.
off by 1. Like I said, 2 and she was a 1.
Sure.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And you want to know what else, Liz? I couldn't find any 5s. Like, what's the deal with Enneagram 5? Can we talk about that today too?
Oh, we can talk about that. We can talk about 5s all day.
Yeah.
I'm not super shocked. 5s are hard to come by in group things.
Well, why? Tell me about it because I'm so confused. Like, because I was like, do 5s just not hire a doula?
They, it depends on the research they've done.
Okay.
They're going to do extensive research. And they're going to keep researching until they feel like they've done enough research to take the next step. But usually there's never enough research in the world for a 5.
For a 5. Okay. All
so,
right.
9 months is not quite long enough to feel like they've gained expertise.
Is it a rare type though?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, actually.
Okay. I was just curious.
I know 6s tend to be one, not popular, but like a lot of people identify as 6. But I don't know about 5s. 5s are just reserved. Like 5s are by their ego structure, they are a reserved type. One of their nicknames is that of the observer. So they're going to hang back and watch before diving in and engaging if they do it all.
So maybe it's like they watch all their friends get a doula, but they're still like, I'm just not sure if that's for me.
Right. Exactly.
Or maybe that's how they feel about parenting in general. Like, I'll just watch all y'all have babies and then maybe decide if that's like maybe not for me or if it is for me.
Right. I mean, every parent is going to have their core fear triggered by the thought of parenting. But certainly for a 5, there is this fear that I don't have enough to meet the demands of the world, the demands of a little child that I cannot reason with. And so it's terrifying, in that regard to that particular ego structure. It's terrifying that like they're placing themselves in the position of like, always having to be on for this other thing that they can't control,
Oh my gosh. As a 7 parent, I feel a lot of that too. There's so much crossover. All right. So let's get to the basics. Tell us a little bit about you, Rude Ass Enneagram, and if you could define the Enneagram and like, because there's some people listening that are like, what in the world?
The what now?
Is she talking the what? Where do I take this test? What is this?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So I'm Liz Orr. I am the sole proprietor or the chief creative bully of Rude Ass Enneagram. I started Rude Ass Enneagram, just an Instagram account, back in 2018. Just as a silly thing. I had seen all these like astrology accounts on Instagram that were making fun of the different astrological signs. And I was like, wait, the Enneagram is really rude. Like, it really hurts my feelings every time I get an Ennea thought of the day email.
Yeah.
Let's take this angle. Let's be silly with it. And so I started it. I had no expectation with it, and it blew up. And so as it blew up, I kind of came to realize I should probably get trained, because people are seriously thinking about and taking seriously what I have to say. So I went through and got training. And yeah, I've just kind of kept up with it. And, I'm not a very good influencer in that, like, I don't have a schedule. I don't have, I just post when I feel mean.
And somehow still have over 100,000 followers on Instagram. Jeez,
I do.
Louise. Some of us can't break the algorithm.
I'm not convinced any one person should have access to that many people's phones, or screens or whatever, but here we are.
And you're entertaining. So that's why I think entertaining.
That's true.
I do think entertaining Instagrams that make people smile, that you should have access to as many people's phones as possible, actually.
Well, that's fair. I think, what I want to do is get you to laugh at your shadow side, because I really, humor can be a defense mechanism that we avoid things with, but it can also really take some of the sting out of our BS, enough for us to look at it and go, oh, like, maybe that's not how it has to be. So, humor is the vehicle for me, with the greater like hope being self-love and growth and all of that the Enneagram really does provide, which I guess sort of like pivoting into that question of what is the Enneagram. It is a really wonderful tool and framework to understand 9 different perspectives on the world, 9 different beliefs about the world as it exists, and then who we have to be in response to that world. So it's a framework, a language, and it's not the only valuable language out there, but it can be so wonderfully transformative. And what it really describes is our motivation, right? It's not just this sort of random set of characteristics or traits. It's what we are motivated to avoid and to appear to other people. And just what our drive is.
Yeah. So I'm a 7.
You are.
Liz, what are you?
I am a mean old type 8.
You are an 8. Okay. And
Yes.
that was Nikki, right?
That was Nikki.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Nikki is like really, that's the one we call a soft marshmallow in the inside when you get to
Exactly.
know, when we get to know the 8s. Okay. So in this podcast episode, you guys, we're going to dig into the Enneagram guide that Liz and I co-created for labor support. Like, what does this motivation or this personality type, this archetype, your worldview, how does that play a role when you're pregnant with the people that are around you? Because what happens is you're going to go inward. Everyone goes inward. Everyone closes. Everyone shuts the door. And so if the people around you understand what are the things that motivate you and keep you safe and what your core fear is, then we can support you best when you're leaning inward and like letting go and birth. So this is going to be an awesome episode. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
But I have a question for you.
Let's go.
You said you went to like training and you do Rude Ass Enneagram on Instagram.
Yes.
Do you have it on like TikTok or anywhere else, or are you like just on the gram?
So I am on TikTok for the purpose of posting them on Instagram.
Okay.
I find TikTok can be like a fun tool to create more video content. I've made like what type of bagel you are based on your Enneagram type. What part of the Thanksgiving meal are you? I don't do too much with TikTok. People are welcome to follow me. It's Rude Ass Enneagram, but I use it just as like an editing tool, really.
Essentially, and then put it over. That's funny. That's exactly how I use it. I like make a reel and then because it's just easier. And then I put it up on the IG. Okay. As an Enneagram practitioner who's trained now, like, do you get paid to like speak or do things with children or like, I don't know, adults?
Yes. So I do a little bit of one-on-one work. I have like a whole full-time job that has nothing to do with, it doesn't really have to do directly with the Enneagram. I work in higher education with college students, but I also have a certificate in spiritual direction. So I do some one-on-one Enneagram related work that's somewhere I consider it more spiritual direction, even if it's not explicit, if we're not explicitly talking about spirit, divine, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I do occasionally get the opportunity to, whether it's out in the community or at the university that I'm at, sort of hold workshops about the Enneagram, which is awesome and wonderful. And occasionally I'll get paid for those. And if they're at my university, I consider it part of my work. So I don't bill for those, but.
So cool though. So this thing that started off as like, the Enneagram is rude and I'm going to make these fun things to make people laugh. Like it's really turned into like a side hustle for you.
It really has. It really has.
So let's embrace it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, it's really important to me in my business because I've incorporated it as a tool for my private doula clients. And then I've encouraged it as a tool for anyone taking my online course with Birth Story Academy. And then I've put it out there for free, you guys. So if you want to download this guide, like all you have to do is go to birthstory.com and there's like several places. There's like a pop-up, there's a sign up for it, and then it's under the workbook tab. So it's all on there. And then Liz made me for my Instagram, which is birth.story.academy. Liz made 1 through 9 Enneagrams of amazing kind of before and after shots of like kind of making fun of in a rude but sweet way, birth and labor and support and kind of like what you think you want versus like reality. And so they were a big hit on Instagram and Pinterest. And so if you guys want to go check those out, they're awesome. And thank you so much for making those.
Oh, it was so much fun. And it was really like, it was actually quite moving for me to be really like combing through all these birth photos and see these amazing moments and see the transformation between those like tense initial moments of labor. And then, whether it's after birth or whatever it is, they're just beautiful. So it was really a fun project for me and really kind of moving. So
yeah. And I love the balance of like core fear with power and motivation and worldview. So are you ready to dig in?
Let's rock and roll.
Okay. All right. Let's start with Enneagram 1. Like, what do you know about ones and where did we land on the type of labor support that a 1 needs?
Yes. So type 1s, they often have this archetypal name of being the perfectionist or the reformer. The high side of 1 is that these are folks of unfailing integrity, really high standards. I like to think of them as the stubborn optimists of the Enneagram because they believe that the world can and should be better. And some of their traps that they fall into is some real rigidity, a lack of flexibility. They struggle to forgive themselves. And they have this core fear that the flaws within them, the mistakes, the messiness, even like, I call them the spicier emotions, right? Like anger, resentment, whatever. they fear that those are revealing of a deeper rot within them. Like there is something wrong with them. And that's terrible because they see the world as this broken, corrupted place. They hope and believe that it can be better, but oh my God, what if this thing within me can't be redeemed and I am just contributing to the garbage of the world?
Oh my gosh. And I can't even imagine perpetuating that to pregnancy and bringing a child into that world view.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, there's just so much internal pressure they place on themselves to be perfect in whatever it is they do.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about like, what do you think that is the type of like labor support that they need, you know? But what do you think as someone who's a type 1 imagining this ideal or perfect situation, like, and it seems like something that would be really difficult is pivoting, right? Like being flexible with a birth plan.
Yep. That's going to be a major growing edge for a 1, is that adaptability, that ability to just like roll with, okay, this is not what I planned. This is not what I researched and expected. But this is what we have to do. And I think there really is something deeply supportive for the 1 in being given the space to be messy and angry and imperfect. And just being given that permission and like not flinching when the 1 cannot contain all of their frustration and their anger with the process. And, 1s are in the body center and there's this real like urgency to all of the types 8, 9, and 1 in the body center. And so a lot of the frustration of the 1 can sort of be amplified by like, why is this not going according to plan right now?
Yeah.
Why am I not in control right now?
Yep. And this one in the guide, it's named the Mackenzie. And Mackenzie is a 1, and she's actually she's the 1 in the ENNEAGRAM picture graphics that you made, Liz. And Mackenzie is like literally like the typical, like, she's got her master's degree from Harvard. And the reason that I picked her for this one is because she was like she really was, nervous about a lot of things and had experienced multiple losses. And that was very difficult for her to be able to kind of like let go in the fact that her body wasn't doing what it was supposed to do, which is keeping a baby and letting the baby stay. Yeah. And so like as her doula and her, she's married, so her spouse had to give her that permission to really to yell and to be angry and to roar and to like come to terms with the fact that like she's not defective, that she suffered a miscarriage. And in her birth, when she did give birth, her birth started with her water breaking when she wasn't in labor, which is so normal. It happens like 15% of the time. But man, as her birth team, we had to like wrap around her and help her like really come to terms with the fact that like this is the new normal, right? And that you're just going to have to let go and there is no such thing as perfect, meaning like in her mind, I think perfect was like, well, at 40 weeks, contractions start and then labor progresses and then eventually my water breaks. And instead it was like, your water breaks and you're not having any contractions and like having to pivot. So reassurance that everything that was happening and everything that she was doing was normal and okay was key for type 1 for Mackenzie. Is there anything that you would add to that?
No, I mean, that's a like beautiful illustration of that. And it's all about sort of supporting the 1 to release and like let the process be what it is, regardless of what they planned or what they think it should be.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about type 2.
Type 2s, sweet little type 2s. Type 2s are, again, they have this archetypal name of the nurturer or the provider. And these are your warm and fuzzy Care Bears of the Enneagram. 2s have a beautiful gift of knowing how to just provide for others. They just intuit what someone needs without them even having to say it. They are deeply relational and are just generous people, but the traps that they can fall into is really like neglecting their own needs. They have a hard time even identifying their own needs because at their core, there is this belief about the world that there isn't enough love. There certainly isn't enough love for them, and that they have to earn any love that they can feel. So they are going to have a hard time in birth receiving care, allowing themselves to be the center of care, not taking care of everybody else. Like that is going to be a really difficult challenge for the 2 in labor.
Yeah. And so this one I named in the guide the Haley. And one of the things that had come up was a core fear too of if the baby would love her. To like this instant connection with parenting that I think kind of plagues a lot of people is like, I'm bringing this life into the world and like, I love them so much. And are they going to love me back? What I found in Haley's birth was that having the right birth team to support her as a 2 was the most important thing because she was so highly susceptible to like people pleasing and like, oh, okay, I'll do whatever the hospital tells me to do. And I'll take all the, you can poke me here and touch me here and do all the procedures because I'm so afraid of jeopardizing the relationship with my, gynecologist or obstetrician that I've been with since I was 18 years old. And I'm afraid to say no. So as her birth team and her doula as a 2, we really had to like come around her and encourage her that there was that relational safety, that no matter what her choices were for her body, that we loved her anyway.
Yes. Yeah. Two things that sort of popped into my mind as you were sharing that. That fear is like around like, is the baby going to love me? That is such a perfect reflection of what types 2, 3, and 4, all of these heart center types, they often find their worth reflected in their relationships. They believe that their worth is reflected. Their relationships become these mirrors for them, for their worth. And so they can be very sensitive to rejection and the fear of like, is this child going to reflect back to me the love that I have for them is a deep fear. And then the other thing that you were talking about, this like wrapping around and advocacy that needs to happen for the 2. Because again, yeah, you're right. They will people please, they will go with whatever, whoever's in front of them is saying whatever that is. They tend to be very agreeable, sometimes to their detriment. And so for a birthing team to be able to advocate for the 2 and to give the 2 space to access some of the yuckier feelings of frustration, anger, like, hey, you're not seeing me. Because 2s have a hard time of, advocating for themselves and allowing themselves to acknowledge that they're getting pissed off. That relationship is so important to them that they don't even want to acknowledge that they're frustrated within it or that their needs are not being met within it. So if a birth team can give the 2 that space to be like, wait, no, this doctor is not hearing me or is not recognizing my needs, and let them like get pissed about it so that they can advocate. That's really powerful.
So powerful. Now, I believe everyone needs and deserves a doula, but when I was going through the guide with you, I was like, oh, the twos were like, you really need a doula. Like you need to move from like the helper giver to the receiver. And the easiest way to do that is by paying someone, AKA a doula, to do that for you.
Exactly.
Okay. So what about type 3s, the performer, like achiever type?
Yes, the superstar. 3s are just gorgeous people, regardless of what, how different they all look. 3s, performer, achiever, again, in that heart center. So they're looking for the reflection of their worth outside of themselves. And these folks have a gift for making things happen and kind of making things look really easy. They achieve great things. They kind of manifest great things. They bring a lot of value to their world, to anything that they touch. But that fear that I am only worth what you can see that I've done, the demonstration of my value is the core of my value. There's not something deeper. That creates this dynamic where they become very afraid of failing. They become very afraid of missing the mark, because any little tarnish to the facade or the reputation will just bring the whole house of cards down. So they can get very frustrated when things aren't happening. They can get very frustrated when they can't make things happen. And they get very impatient with their own emotions, because those emotions can get in the way of productivity. So that can be a real challenge for the 3 in labor, is like allowing themselves to feel and being patient with the process rather than thinking that it's taking too long or whatever. They need to be on to the next thing.
Yep. That's exactly it. Like when I named this the Lauren went all the way to 42 weeks gestation. And, only about 10 to 15% of people will make it that far, right? The average for a first-time birthing person is about 41 weeks and a day, which means like 50% of people have given birth by then. So Lauren, as a type 3, like she really didn't understand like going over her due date. Like she thought like there's a clear end point here. I do this pregnancy thing and then it's over at this point. And it was kind of, hilarious for me as her birth support person, helping her go the extra mile and like telling her, the result is still there. The baby is still coming, even though you're over 40 weeks, she couldn't kind of see it, to believe it kind of thing. And the other thing about Lauren, that a sweet little baby angel, Lauren, that I love, is that she was hilarious because she really, and type 3s really do kind of care about what other people think about them, and a lot of people bring in a birth mirror so that they can see the baby be born. And in Lauren's case, we brought in a birth mirror because she wanted to do her hair and makeup right before the baby was born so that she was meeting her son Maverick when she looked her best. And it was so type 3, Liz, don't you think?
Yes. Image is very important. And it's funny because again, they're gorgeous. We're all gorgeous people, but like 3s are, you kind of think of them as the archetypal, just beautiful person without having to put much effort in, but they think they have to put so much effort in.
Yeah, it was so cute though. She was like, I just have to be perfect when I meet my baby, So the next one I love talking about too, type 4, the romantic, the individualist.
The tortured artist.
Yes. Okay. Tell me all about type 4.
Type 4s. Type 4s are funny. Whatever I say, some type 4 will say, well, she didn't get this piece. She didn't get this piece. And that is very typical of type 4 because they have this beautiful gift of an attunement to beauty and depth and mystery and meaning. They really are the people who like plumb the depths of experience, of our human experience, and they bring meaning to it. They make their relationships these special experiences. But they feel deeply misunderstood. And there is this core fear within them that ultimately, like, they are not meaningful. They don't have significance. And so to compensate for that, they perform how meaningful and special they are. They are unique. They are different. They want to be seen as distinct. And they can do some of that performance. And so they get frustrated with boredom. They get frustrated with shallowness, what they perceive to be shallowness, or anything that's kind of like mundane. They get frustrated when they are like anybody else. And so what can be a real challenge in the birthing process, I can imagine, is just like when there are like kind of, for lack of a better word, there are administrative moments in giving birth, right?
Yep.
There are common moments in giving birth where the four is not going to feel all that special meaning, that special significance, and they're going to get a little sassy about it.
Yeah. So this one is called the Lindsay. And when Lindsay hired me, which is, I feel like such a type 4, right? Like she was a type of person that she was like, I just always saw myself adopting, not actually like just getting pregnant. How easy, ordinary, and boring that would be, you know? But the glory to her of this like adoption process was really kind of like what she saw as super special, and which is very cool. But she ended up with an unplanned pregnancy and having to embrace that. And so when I look back at Lindsay's birth as a 4 and the romanticizing of it, I would say was because she was so afraid of it. She kind of made herself romanticize, I think, birth in a way where like the ambiance was like so important. Like it, like the twinkly lights and the candles and like the right essential oil and like the playlist, you know, like the right music. I'm talking about the outfit for going home and the first photos and like really making it special. And so like as the doula and the birth partner, like I just was like, oh my gosh, you are working so hard to have a deep connection to this pregnancy that started out as unplanned, you know?
Right.
And I felt like she really used her 4's ability to kind of tap into making it a beautiful experience that when she was kind of afraid of it. Do I see in the 4s that I work with a little bit of like a fantasy, right? Where people say like, oh, I just want this like calm and peaceful environment. And I'm like, no, like it's birth,
Right,
you know, it's primal, it's roaring, it's loud. It's often mundane and boring in between contractions, you know, when nothing's going on. If you get an epidural and you're a 4, you're like super bored. You're like twiddling your thumbs, like what in the world is going on here? So anyway, so some of the things that I felt like in the birth room with Lindsay and like with the other 4s is that I just kept reminding her how extraordinary being a vessel to life is and bringing life into this world. And like, there's nothing ordinary about that.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's perfect. And I think also like what you did so artistically there is that you heard and you understood her desire to be special and meaningful and significant in this relationship that she's giving birth to too. I mean, you understood her, you sought to understand her. And that is a deep longing of the 4, as well as something that they can sometimes resist because that challenges their specialness. But I think it's more, even with that little push pull, I think it's incredibly supportive to do the work to try to understand the 4.
Mm-hmm. So that brings us to type 5. Back to the 5.
Yeah.
So we touched on it in the beginning. And, type 5's the observer, the investigator.
Yes.
This one client was a wing. So like she couldn't decide if she was a 5 or 6. Like I said, I couldn't find any 5s, y'all. Okay. So this one is called the K. And K was like, well, sometimes I'm a 5 and sometimes I'm a 6. But the way that she labored was for sure a 5. So that's why she got thrown into like her wing role for this one, because she was like 100% a type 5 when she birthed. So tell us all about the 5s a little bit more than what we heard at the beginning.
Sure. So yes, that view of the world as intrusive, as demanding, as overwhelming, really is kind of the suffering of the 5. They have this beautiful gift of clarity. They have a very precise mind, and just kind of this vast, like brain for knowledge. There's this knowing, but it's not just like all the stuff they know. There's also this, like, I understand that there's so much I don't know. That is a deeply ingrained piece of the 5. And again, they see the world as overwhelming and intrusive and demanding. And so they really want to be self-sufficient. They don't want to rely on others in case then someone wants them to return the favor. They fear that they don't have enough internally, whether it's expertise or energy or the capacity to withstand, emotions in real time. There just is this fear that they don't have that capacity enough to meet life. And so they tend to withdraw. They tend to compartmentalize and really sort of section off, like, this is the situation, this is my feelings about it. And when I'm alone and nobody will be intruding on me, I'll go deal with my feelings. But in real time, I'm going to just sort of not even really be present. I'm just going to go through the motions. And so that, again, that challenge for the 5 during labor is just that compartmentalizing, that withdrawing and shutting down in real time when things get intense and challenging, or they don't feel competent enough. They don't feel like they've been prepared or they know enough to meet the next thing.
Yep. And that's exactly what happened with Kay in her birthing time. She became a massive under communicator. I think the whole process was overwhelmed. And if you ask her, she'll say, oh, well, I hired a doula for Josh. for her partner. And we're like not even owning that the doula was for her,
Right.
Deeply intellectual, did all of the research, and the things that made Kay feel safe were birth plans and backup plans that were evidence-based, right? Like, well, we're going to start here, and if that doesn't work, we'll go here, and if that doesn't work. And I will say, like, she didn't call for help until like the very end. Like, she went so inward. So that's another thing. The birth team for a 5, the few that are out there in this world, but like, you need to understand the stages of labor and recognize when your person is in labor and needs help, because your 5 is going to get overwhelmed and shut down. And so
Yes.
if you need to help them, you got to be really in tune with them by understanding the stages of labor and where they're at in the labor process, because like Kay, they're not going to be communicating with you where they're at. So you're going to have to just go with it.
Yeah. And it is, I mean, it's almost counterintuitive, particularly in an urgent kind of situation like birth, but to give the 5 space when they do go internally. So like you said, knowing the stages of labor, knowing your stuff as the birth support team is crucial, because you can trust in your knowledge, and the 5 is gonna 5. They're gonna go internal, and trying to force them out is not gonna be the move. But just reassuring them that they have people who know what they're doing, and they have enough to engage in this process, is going to be incredibly supportive of them.
Yeah. I would agree with that for sweet Kay. So now that brings me to type 6, which Kay has a little bit of also, the loyalist and skeptic in her. But this one was named after one of my clients, Hallie. And Hallie had a traumatic first birth. So it was interesting that the core fear of a 6 of being without support or being alone, it's exactly what happened to her in her first birth. And so tell us a little bit more about the 6, and then I'll tell you some more about Hallie.
Yeah. So that core fear for the 6 is that of being helpless and abandoned and without support. And really at its like core of that core is a fear of trusting in themselves. They see the world as this very dangerous place, and they're not wrong. We live in a dangerous world. And they are afraid that they do not have what they need to keep themselves safe in the world. And that is why they end up being these incredibly loyal people, these incredibly prepared people, because they're preparing for the worst case scenario. And they are loyal to others, so others will be loyal to them, and the others will protect them. But they don't trust in others, and they don't totally trust in themselves, that they have thought about everything that could possibly go wrong and properly prepare for it. I'm so curious to hear Hallie's story, because what 6s often forget is that they have survived. Like they have been okay.
Yeah. Well, and I have a question for you on 6s too. Like, do you see that with the Enneagram, this is how we're born? Or do you see like 6 to me, like screams trauma survivor, like generalized anxiety disorder, chronic depression, right? Anyway, I just was wondering your opinion on that as a practitioner. Is this how we're born, or is the world in which we live in create our Enneagram type?
So I align with what most sort of traditional teachers would say, which is that we are born our type, but our experiences in life are going to impact the rigidity of our patterns, like how stuck we get.
Okay.
So a 6 who has experienced a lot of trauma, the structure that already exists to protect them is going to be that much more cemented. The patterns that exist are going to be that much more pronounced and automatic. Versus, and none of us have a perfect holding environment. None of us have perfect parents. And this is not a like trash your parents kind of take. Our parents are wounded people too, and they're just doing their best.
Mm-hmm.
And so because a lot of the patterns and the really the like pathways that form in our brains, these are cemented when we are toddlers. So like before we understand what's going on in the world. So imperfect holding environment will reinforce what we are born with, which is our type.
Got it.
Yeah.
I swear, I don't know if there's like Enneagram therapists, but
There are.
There are. Okay,
Yes.
good. Because I was thinking about this and with Hallie's story, because like I said, like basically her core fear as a 6, this like skeptic that things could go right, she was afraid of being without support and being alone. In her first birth experience, she had a very rare placental abruption. Her uterus seized, and she basically, didn't have any support. She was alone, had to go back to the operating room, and it was, very, very traumatic. Okay.
Yeah.
So then to go on to another pregnancy and to hire a doula and to create a birth team as the 6, where you've had a previous experience that reinforced, I guess, that rigidity.
Right.
She had to have so much time to prepare. So essentially, like the day she became pregnant, she hired a doula. So that was like so type 6 of her,
Yes.
And we talked and communicated all the time, and we had to play out every scenario for her to feel safe.
I was going to say, so one of the other archetypal names of the 6 is the devil's advocate. And just the like constant almost testing. And so I'm curious for you, like, you got interrogated.
Interrogated. Like it was like, well, at 20 weeks, what if this happens? At 24 weeks, at 30 weeks, hospital bag packed in the car seat installed, like at 30 weeks, like, okay, well, what if the baby has to go to the NICU? So essentially what we did for birth support for a 6 was extra prenatal visits, establishing our relationship very early on, so that she understood that she was safe and that she wasn't going to be alone no matter what path unfolded. But she really dug under the hood of like every scenario. And my job was to help her focus on her body having innate wisdom and being able to give birth.
Yes.
And because her body didn't do that the first time. So really having an abundance, I would say, as a labor support guide, having an abundance of time to prepare and to think about it, and then to have people around you that can advocate for you and that will show up for you. So like as the doula, I knew like, don't wait until she's 6 centimeters dilated. Like when she has her first contraction, be by her side, even if you have to be there for 40 hours, type thing. So she ended up having a beautiful, beautiful vaginal birth. It was very redemptive and healing and all the things that she needed it to be as a 6. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's incredible. And you nailed it, right? Like you were by her side, you communicated with her. Communication and honesty is so important for the 6, establishing trust and honoring that trust. And walking with her when in this, like in her redemption, in her body's ability to do, what it needed to do and keep everybody safe. Her and the baby safe. Like, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And it did it. So, so my favorite type,
I wonder why.
the 7, the enthusiast, the Heidi. I also named it after a client because I wanted to give the perspective of like what it was like to support a 7, even though I am a 7. So tell us all about, tell me about myself. Tell me about a 7.
It's my favorite thing to do. Type 7s are the party people of the Enneagram. They are just a blast and a half. But really the beautiful gift of the 7 is potential, innovation, expansion. These are incredibly creative folks. You know, I made a joke at the beginning of our recording about leave it to a 7 to be on the frontier, but like really and truly, 7s are 1,000 miles out in front of the rest of us. These folks are on the cutting edge of what's next and what's needed. And they just like, they see the world in HD, you know, it's like everything has potential. But the trap for the 8, or excuse me, for the 7 is this fear, right? That, the world accepts mediocrity. It accepts disappointment. The world is okay with potential not being realized. The world is okay with deprivation, and the world wants to limit me. I'm not going to be able to experience the fullness of everything that I can see because the world is trying to put a damper on that. And maybe there's something within me that limits my ability to express my potential. So 7s are going to avoid anything that feels limiting or painful or like they're missing out. They're Houdinis, right? They're going to wriggle out of traps and limitations.
Yep. And I'm going to tell you about Rachel and a little bit about myself too, as a 7 and this, how this plays out in the birth space. Okay.
Yeah.
As a 7, and this was when Rachel hired me, it's like she really wanted to have an unmedicated birth and to have spontaneous labor, but then also simultaneously was completely afraid of like not being able to move her legs. And it's like, I don't want to feel pain, but then I don't want to be able to be trapped in the bed where I can't move my body either. So like inhibiting like the experience in some way. So
right.
It was just, it's so funny because it's like with 7s, it's like they want everything, but it's like, but you have to choose something. Like I can't take away your pain and get your body to move at the same time, you know?
Right. Exactly.
So, and then the other thing is that, you know, with Rachel is it was like, okay, well, I'm going to take hypnobirthing and I'm going to take Bradley method and I'm going to take birthing from within and I'm going to take Lamaze and I'm going to take I'm going to sign up for all the classes because I just really want to be like, I don't want you to put me in a box of like, I have to birth like this way. I just kind of want to know like all the possibilities of the types of ways in which you can birth. And then I just kind of want to see what happens, you know? And what happened for Rachel was an induction that led to a C-section. And I always like joke with her now as I'm like, how much more 7 could you get of like experiencing everything unmedicated, then medicated, then trying to push a baby out, then ending in the OR. Like that's so 7. Like you want to experience it all. You experienced it all. You know?
She really got the birthing sampler pack.
Yes, exactly. So I think the way that we help 7s is to try to like really to encourage them to not just buy all the books and sign up for all the classes, but actually read one of those books or do one of those classes, like execute rather than just think about all the cool things that you could do to prepare for your birth and make a 7 nail down birth preferences because they're going to want to just go with the flow. And I don't want to be trapped by a birth plan. And what if I this, but really though, how do you advocate for someone if you don't really understand what their true core wishes are? And they're verbal processors. So like a 7 in a labor room is going to tell you every contraction. They're going to tell you, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. This sucks. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And then you're going to be like, oh, so you wanted an epidural. And they're going to be like, no, I don't want an epidural. Like I'm doing fine. And it can get very confusing. So talking to a 7 in advance about like, what do you want for your body prior to being in the experience?
Yes.
You know, with Rachel, like once we got into the experience, it was kind of like, all over the place, you know?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, and also what I found is the complete rejection of authority. Now, Rachel's super smart. She's an attorney. She was one of the first women to graduate from the Citadel.
Wow.
Like the one of the first 7 graduates. Like, but still, like, you know, she just wants to be in control. And like, you know, the healthcare provider comes in and you can see like the
Yep.
but like still rejecting everything that's being told to her. Like, you know,
Yep.
like, hey, I think we should go back for a C-section. It's like, well, but you
Right.
know,
Right.
type of thing. So really helping a 7 understand like when a healthcare provider is giving authority that's going to help you, not hurt you.
Yes. And it's really funny so just reflecting that rejection of authority, like a 6 might do that as well. An 8 will very likely do that, you know, and there's different reasons for it, right? The 6 might reject the authority because they don't trust the authority. They don't trust them to keep them safe. The 7 is going to probably reject the authority because I don't want you to limit, or like, what if there's a better option? What if there's a second opinion? And the 8 is going to be like, don't control me. Don't try to tell me what to do. So it's just really funny how that one sort of action of like rejecting authority can be, there's a very specific motivation behind it, which is going to determine the type or reveal the type.
Yeah. And that brings us to you. Speaking
sure
of
does.
the challenger, the 8.
The pain in the ass.
Oh my gosh. And this could be called the Liz. It could be called the Nikki from the Trauma Podcast. But in the birth world, I call it the Abby.
Mm-hmm.
And oh man, my Abby, she's so innate. Oh my gosh. Okay. So tell me a little bit about the 8s.
The 8s. So 8s are, we're just like large and in charge personalities and energies. We have a wonderful gift of empowerment, of strength, of immediacy, of decisiveness. But we perceive the world as a place where the strong, particularly the ones who hold power and capital, take advantage of the vulnerable. And so that's what we're always scanning for. Who's in charge, and are they being responsible with that power that they have? Or are they exploiting others? Are they controlling others? There's a real fear around loss of agency, loss of autonomy, loss of control for the 8. There's a distinction that's often drawn, like the 8 doesn't necessarily want to be in control, but they do not want to be controlled. And so in the process of labor, there's the fear of the loss of control. There's fear of loss of their own agency. There's fear of their vulnerabilities. Like, what if I'm not strong enough to do this? There's a lot that they can get trapped in. And so what they do is they'll deny their pain. They'll deny letting anybody close to them. They'll reject authority. They're an intense force to be reckoned with on a good day, let alone in the midst of labor.
Yeah. Intense force is exactly how I would call Abby. She had a very traumatic cesarean, and in a true 8 fashion, and this is hilarious, she's a doula. She hadn't hired a doula. So number 8, isn't that?
Doesn't that track? Yep. We deny what we need.
Yeah. She's a doula and didn't hire a doula. So anyway, she had a traumatic cesarean section. So she finally, 1,000 people convinced her to be vulnerable and to hire a doula and to try to have a what's called a trial of labor after cesarean, which hopefully leads to a VBAC, a vaginal birth after a cesarean. And so Abby's she's so strong. She's the strongest advocate for herself ever. It's kind of like, don't get in her way, when she's advocating for herself. But it's like, doesn't want to have to do that. You know what I mean? It was like, she can do that. She can fight for herself, but like just really didn't, want to do it. And so as her birth team, the number one thing you have to do for an 8 that I have found in working with Abby and working with other 8s is just help them surrender and let go. So the faster that they can get to their primal mammalian, like birthing self and just out of their own head, the easier it is to release control. It's like, how can you drug an 8 without drugging them? You know what I'm saying? Like the 8 becomes everything that you need them to be when they're wasted, or you've put opioid pain medication inside of them. But like when an 8 hires you as your doula and they don't want an epidural or opioid pain medication, it was like, okay, basically as the birth team, like that was what we were thinking. Okay, is like, how can we like just like circle around Abby to like protect her and advocate for her so she can stop fighting, and she can just let go, And then that's what we had to do for her. And in Abby's story, it went like 10 levels deeper, right? Her husband's a pastor. She's a very devout Christian, and her trial of labor took a dark turn, and she was going to end in the operating room in a repeat cesarean section. And the way that we supported Abby was reminding her about how much God loved her and that God was in control, and that there was nothing that anyone could do to help her or save her other than just keep talking to the God that created her. And so that's what helped her, is reminding her of her faith and allowing her to show her weakness and her fatigue to this God that created her and loved her unconditionally, and that was going to save her life and keep her protected even in the OR a second time. Yeah.
That's perfect, right? Like, you named so much there, but as 8s, we are so used to being the ones in control. We are so used to being these like stone pillars for everybody else. So by keeping her reminded that there is a power greater than her, that is in charge, that is holding her, it's a good strength that is wrapped its arms around her, that loves her, that will keep her safe. She doesn't have to be the pillar in this moment. She can surrender, and it's okay. She doesn't have to be the strongest one. Like that is what the 8 needs. We hate to admit it, that we actually need permission to not be the strongest one who's in control. But that is powerful, and that clears the way for the 8 to surrender.
Yeah. Well said. Okay, Liz, we're on the last one. I don't want our time together to end, but we are. This is so fun, but we are on type 9.
We are.
Tell me all about the peacemaker.
Yes. So type 9s, they have a reputation of being these easygoing, wonderfully receptive, grounded, chill people. It's total bullshit. They're the most stubborn type on the Enneagram. They are a lot of teachers will say 9 is actually the strongest type on the Enneagram, but they are strong like a mountain. You just can't move them. You're not, if they don't want to do something, you're not going to get them to do what you want them to do. They have this gift of a unity and an understanding of wholeness in disparate parts. They see the value in different perspectives. But the trap that they fall into is seeing the world as this fragmented, broken place where they don't matter. Like there's so much discord in the world, and they don't want to contribute to it. So they just kind of coast. They don't make contact with their own strength. They don't make contact with their own intensity, and they kind of fall asleep to it. So they have a hard time identifying what is important to them. They have a hard time identifying even like what they're feeling in the moment. And they want everybody else to know that they're important, but they sometimes believe that they are not important. And so they don't advocate for themselves or say like, hey, this is what I really need in this moment. They hate the spotlight. They don't want to be the center of attention. And so, birthing can be really difficult for them. Labor and, being the center of attention, being the most important one in the room, like that is such a friction against how they see themselves.
Yeah. This was called the Abigail. And it was interesting because Abigail is one of my clients, and she's like an Instagram influencer. And so like before I even met her in person, I was like a little intimidated by her because she had like so many followers. And I just like, I think I was expecting like a 7, right?
Sure.
And then I met Abigail, total 9. Okay. And the one thing about Abby and the other 9s that I've worked with is the first thing out of their mouth is that they're leaning towards a home birth or a birth center birth. And then when you're like, ask them why, it's because they don't like tension at all. And so when they start thinking about the fact that they may have to adhere to like hospital policies or procedures or something like that, they just start detaching. Like stubborn. Abigail was like, yep. She was like, bye, I'm out. Just so you know, Abigail was a birth center birth because she was not going to go to the hospital and have to have any of that. But in her labor, she was numbing out. She was detaching. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we often do. We go inward, no matter what type you are. We go inward. We go to labor land. We kind of start to detach. But this was like a different type of detachment. Like a different kind, like so much peace, like both the grandmas were there being let into the room. And, heaven forbid we say one of the moms can't come in, And so like everyone was welcome. It was like, let me just make peace with my husband's family and all of the things. She was very strong and she was a fighter, and like there was no she was at the birth center, so there is no epidural, but like there was no possible way she was going to get an epidural or any of the things. But like when it came time for Abigail to birth, okay, so like her body was taking over. It was doing all the things. It got her to 10 centimeters, right? But at some point, Abigail had to make the choice to give birth to, and I don't mean push a little. I mean, push your baby out into the world.
Yep.
And when those sensations happen and you're unmedicated, your birth team has to get you to connect to your body, to connect to the moment, and to choose to become a mother right then.
Yep.
You have to choose to birth. And so bringing a 9 into their body so that they can make that choice to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Because even Abigail, unmedicated, she had numbed all that pain away.
Yep. They're really good at that.
So, I mean, seriously, it was like not one contraction bothered her at all.
Yep.
But we pushed for a long time because I had to have a come to Jesus with Abigail about coming into her body, feeling and pushing through those feelings and choosing birth. Right? Like choosing to just not be pregnant anymore, choosing to not be in labor anymore, and knowing that she's important. She is so important, and that moment of birth is important. So that's how Abigail, the peacemaker, gave birth.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's perfect. It's bringing her into the present, into the intensity of it, and reminding her like you of any of the types are strong enough to do this, to show up right now, right here, and make that choice, and engage engage right now. I mean, that's so that to get into sort of traditional teaching, engagement is the virtue of the 9, which is like showing up right now, being right here and acting, being an active participant in this.
Yeah. So those were just 9 of my like probably 1,000 doula clients in my career. But like I said, as I'm even going through them with you, Liz, I can identify each of my beautiful clients and like how I was able to, even before I was connecting the Enneagram and the personality types, but like how as doulas and birth partners, we're chameleons and we change and we just move in a way in which we have to support the person that needs support in that moment. And so I hope that everyone will download our guide on your Enneagram type and what that means for the type of labor support that you need, and share it with your birth partners. Share it with your OBGYN. Share it with your midwife. That would just help them get to know you a little bit more and understand that you're not just like a number on a paper coming in here, and that like you're a person, and like these are your core fears. These are your core beliefs about the world. And these potentially are going to impact your birth.
Yes.
And if we're going to reduce birth trauma and we're going to support birthing persons, we need to know how to best support them, and not everyone's a doula. So you guys grab your guide at birthstory.com and then check out Liz Orr's Rude Ass Enneagram, and look on my page too on birth.story.academy for our graphics, because they're incredible. So Liz, thank you so much for being here today. And if anybody wants to take a quiz because you have no idea what your Enneagram is,
yes.
Where should we go?
Eclectic Energies. I'll give you the website so you can put it right in the show notes.
Okay.
That's probably one of the best ones that I've seen. And the way that I would regard the test is it helps narrow down some options. It may not be perfectly diagnostic, but it narrows down a few options, and then you can do a little more research into it on your own.
Awesome. Okay, let's do it. Thank you so much, Liz. And we will be in touch. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Heidi. This is always a blast.
Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan, and prepare for the birth you want, no matter what that looks like. Okay, I have a really amazing discount for you guys with anjahealth.com. So it's ANJAhealth.com. They are my exclusive partner for cord blood and tissue banking. If you've listened to episode 88 of the podcast, where I interview the CEO, Catherine Cross, all about cord blood and tissue banking and the 1,000 questions that I had. My child has cerebral palsy from a birth injury. I cannot go back in time. It is one of my greatest regrets. So I partner with Anja Health because I'm so passionate about cord blood and tissue banking, and I really want to teach you guys all about it. Code Birth Story gives you the biggest discount that there is available, and they are committed to Birth Story always being the biggest discount. So right now it makes your kit only $20, which essentially covers shipping. So it's $180 off with code Birth Story. So please consider cord blood and tissue banking. Look at anjahealth.com. Again, it's ANJA Health.com. And if you are going to